Do you struggle to get the club to swing on plane, or perhaps you're even confused about what swing plane means and how we go about defining it? Hi, I'm Peter Knight, and today we're going to, on this channel, Peter Knight Golf, show you some of the issues that occur when players aren't able to swing the club on plane, but of course first we're going to define exactly what it is. So let's have a look. Essentially, when the club swings back and through, when I set the club up at address, it's sitting on an angle, as you can see here. When it moves back and through, it's moving on an angled or inclined path. And the angle of that path is essentially the swing plane. Now, when I set myself up here, and if we look at the angle of, say, the shaft of the club here, as it goes back and through, it's not going to swing back on that same angle it starts on. It actually does move. So the swing plane is actually a moving thing. But the way we can define it best is to consider that if we imagine we've got two laser lights shining out each end of the club, so one shining out this end, one shining out this end. When I set myself up to hit a shot, if I also imagine a line running between my ball and my target line that's called, when I set myself up, the laser coming out the head end of the shaft points right on that target line. And then as I begin my backswing, the laser that's shining out the head end of the shaft, if we watch from here, we can see that it's pointed to an extension of that target line. I swing it back to here and it's pointed to it back about where the camera is, not that you can see where the camera is. I get to here and the shaft of the club is parallel to my target line and parallel to the ground. So now neither end of the club is pointed to the target line. As I continue to swing back, the grip end of the club is pointed to my target line, so that laser light should be pointing to it. And it tracks along all the way back to the top of the swing and the reverse and the downswing. So if the club tends to swing out this way, or when I'm swinging back, the club's looking like this or looking like this, get to the top of the swing and the shaft's this way or this way, then the club's not being swung on the correct path. And just like any movement, if the club's not being swung on the correct path, it will sort of, I'll say it wobbles. It's a bit like if someone's throwing a javelin and it wobbles all over the place, it tends to look a little bit untidy, wastes energy. When the club's moving correctly on plane, then it moves with more power and more smoothness as well. So let's have a look at the things that actually tend to have the club work off plane. So the first of them is having too much tension in arms and hands right at the start, and so that when the club begins, there's a lot of twisting with the hands and wrists. Now that may be twisting and opening the club face. It may be the hand tightening so that the club head itself doesn't move, but the arms and hands actually move on the grip and then go back. So as well as affecting the club face, that's likely also, when I get that movement, to have the club swing too far behind me. So any hand manipulation is going to likely affect the path that the club swings on. The second one, so the solution for that, better give you the solutions. As the club goes back, monitor the pressure in your hands and arms, particularly the left. As the club goes back, my upper body's turning and there's no movement, there's no change in position of my hands on the grip. So the movement as I go back is very smooth and it's mainly a body movement. It's almost like my body is helping to fling my arms and the club back on the correct path. The second one is that as I swing back, if my posture is not quite correct, so at the start my upper body's leaning forward, sort of, we call it 45 degrees, sort of 45 degrees, it's going to be somewhere around there. If I set up standing too close to the ball and my back is too upright, really common, then as my body turns, the club can easily swing behind me, aside from me further losing posture as I go back. If I do the opposite and tilt forward too much, then it's also easy for my club to move this way. So getting posture right at address is quite important for helping to get the club to swing on plane. Now, all of the things I've talked about, not having the wrists and hands do too much, and retaining posture are important. They're all important, but some of them may stand out if there's issues with you swinging the club back on the correct path. The third, and this can even occur with good posture, is if I swing the club back and my shoulder turn is either too steep or too flat as I swing back. And you can see immediately that's going to have an influence over the way the club moves. What I'm looking to do is have my shoulders stay at right angles to my spine. So as I turn back to the top of the swing, my shoulders have turned at right angles to my spine. That's going to give me the best chance of getting the club to swing back on the correct path. So there's a whole lot of things that go into influencing whether or not the club swings back and through on the correct path. If I hold the club in my fingertips, so no control, but all I'm going to do is hold the club in my fingertips and rotate my body back and through. And what you'll see, particularly from the side, the down the line view, is that the movement of the club creates its own path. Now, I wasn't able to manipulate that path at all because I'm just holding it just strongly enough in my fingertips so the club doesn't fly out of my hand. So have a check with the way you're standing to the ball. Is your posture correct? One other thing on posture, when I set myself up, if my spine is leaning towards the target, that can make the club swing up and out away from the ball. If my upper body is leaning too far away, then it's easy for my club to swing around behind me. So, two things on posture. One is how much you tilted forward and upper body just leaning very, very slightly away from the targeted address. So get the posture right. The second, as you swing back and through, allow your shoulders to turn on the correct path, which is going to be at right angles to your spine. And the final one, and probably the most important one for issues other than just swing plane, is keeping the tension out of hands and arms so that when you swing the club away from the ball, body can turn nice and freely back and through. And what we're looking to do is get the club to move on an orbital path. So rather than a manipulated path or a path that involves a whole lot of different swing positions, it feels like an orbital path and your body's just turning and creating the movement that gets the club to swing on that correct orbit. As soon as you do that, you may have this sense of lack of control, but often it's that lack of control that gives you the first steps towards swinging the club better and swinging it, in this case, swinging it on plane nicely.